Most imagine Richard the Lionheart as England's heroic Crusader king, but he actually spent his reign fighting from Jerusalem to Normandy, losing his life over a disputed treasure. You will learn how this Angevin prince survived court intrigues and rebellion against Henry II. He raised crusade funds through extraordinary means. He conquered Cyprus. He innovated siege warfare at Acre. He defeated Saladin at Arsuf. He was imprisoned for years. He returned to crush John's rebellion. He built Chateau Galad. He died from a crossbow wound during a minor siege far from England. In the year 1157, within the walls of Beaumont Palace in Oxford, a future legend was born. This child, Richard, entered a world of immense power and simmering conflict. His parents were King Henry II of England and the formidable Eleanor of Aquitaine. Their union was a political masterstroke that created the vast Angevin Empire. Yet their relationship was famously turbulent, a complex tapestry of ambition and rebellion that would shape the entire family's destiny. This Angevin domain was not a single, unified kingdom. Instead, it was a sprawling collection of territories stretching from the borders of Scotland all the way to the Pyrenees. Henry II ruled over England, Normandy, and Anjou. Through his marriage to Eleanor, he also controlled the rich and cultured lands of Aquitaine. This made the Angevins the most powerful rulers in Western Europe, their influence dwarfing that of the French king, their nominal feudal overlord. For the young Richard, this grand inheritance was initially distant. As the third surviving son, he was far from the immediate line of succession. The crown was destined first for his older brother, Henry, the young king, and then for his other brother, Geoffrey. This position, studies have shown, often shaped the ambitions of medieval younger sons, pushing them toward military careers or seeking power elsewhere. Richard's future path, leading him to the Crusades and into legend, was profoundly influenced by being a spare heir in a dynasty defined by its vast, cross-channel empire and its deeply complicated family politics. This position as a spare heir consequently immersed Richard in the very political turmoil that would define his youth. Richard the Lionheart spent his formative years in a court defined by constant political tension. Born in 1157, he grew up witnessing the bitter power struggles between his father, King Henry II, and his formidable mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine. This environment was far from a stable royal upbringing. From a young age, Richard was groomed for power, receiving an education that balanced the arts of war with the refinements of culture. He became fluent in both Latin and the Occitan language of southern France, and he developed a known appreciation for poetry and music, composing his own verses. His political loyalties were shaped early. While his older brothers were positioned for the English throne, Richard's destiny was tied to his mother's lands. He was invested as Duke of Aquitaine in 1172, a title he actively preferred over the prospect of ruling distant England. This preference deepened his bond with Eleanor, who saw him as her primary heir and champion in Aquitaine. In contrast, his relationship with Henry II grew increasingly fraught. The king's attempts to redistribute power among his sons, often at Richard's expense, were a primary source of conflict. Historians note that by his late teens, Richard was already a key figure in the Great Rebellion against his father, a clear indication of where his true allegiance lay. His childhood, therefore, was not one of simple privilege, but a rigorous training ground for the Crusader king he would become. The Great Rebellion erupted in 1173, with young Richard joining his brothers Henry and Geoffrey against their father, King Henry II. Their motivations were complex. Historians note the brothers felt their father denied them meaningful power. Richard specifically sought confirmation of his inheritance of Aquitaine, a promise repeatedly broken. Their mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, actively supported their course, seeing the revolt as a means to check her husband's authority. The conflict was a brutal family war, pitting son against father across Normandy and Aquitaine. Richard, then about 16 years old, received his first serious military education during this rebellion. He commanded forces in Aquitaine, defending his mother's duchy against his father's loyalist armies. The fighting was fierce and unforgiving. However, the rebellion ultimately collapsed by 1174. King Henry's forces proved superior, and he captured Eleanor as she attempted to flee, disguised as a man. The king imprisoned her for the next 16 years, a devastating blow to Richard and his siblings. This failed uprising profoundly shaped Richard's political outlook and military prowess. The experience taught him harsh lessons about betrayal and the fragility of royal alliances. He witnessed firsthand the consequences of challenging a powerful monarch without secure support. This period forged his skills in siege warfare and battlefield command, fundamentals he would later rely upon during the Crusades. The rebellion's failure and his mother's long imprisonment instilled in him a deep-seated drive for independent authority, making him determined never to be subordinate again. In February 1194, Richard the Lionheart finally gained his freedom. A massive ransom of 150,000 marks had been paid, securing his release from the custody of Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI. His long journey back to England began immediately. He traveled first through the Low Countries, avoiding the territories of his rival, King Philip II of France. By March, he landed on English soil, greeted with widespread celebration. His return was a moment of national relief after his prolonged captivity. The king's reception, however, was not merely celebratory. His prolonged absence had allowed his brother John and other nobles to challenge royal authority. Richard's immediate priority was to reassert his power. To symbolically reaffirm his kingship, a second coronation was held at Winchester Cathedral on April 17th. This unique ceremony was not just a repetition of his original crowning. As one chronicler noted, it served to wash away the stain of captivity and present the king as restored and divinely sanctioned once more. This deliberate act of political theater was crucial. Research has shown that medieval kingship relied heavily on the monarch's physical presence. Analysis reveals that Richard spent the following months tirelessly touring his kingdom, confirming charters and settling disputes. Some historians believe this period solidified a more administrative approach to English rule. His journey back and subsequent actions were a clear message. Royal authority, temporarily weakened, was now firmly and personally reinstated by the Crusader king. Yet this reassertion of royal power would soon face its most direct challenge not from abroad, but from within his own family. While Richard the Lionheart remained imprisoned in Germany, his younger brother John launched a bold bid for the English throne. With crucial support from King Philip II of France, John seized control of several key castles and attempted to rally England's barons to his cause. He declared Richard's continued captivity as a sign of his brother's unfitness to rule. Historical analysis reveals John's actions were a calculated gamble, exploiting the power vacuum and the immense financial strain of the king's ransom. His rebellion, however, failed to secure widespread loyalty among the nobility, many of whom remained cautiously loyal to the absent monarch. Upon his return in the spring of 1194, Richard faced a critical decision regarding his treacherous brother. Contrary to contemporary expectations for severe punishment, the king displayed remarkable clemency. He famously stated, "I would have pardoned him even had he attempted something greater," as recorded by the chronicler Roger of Hovden. This surprising mercy was not born of sentiment but of sharp political calculation. Scholars argue that Richard understood that executing or permanently disinheriting John could create a martyr and destabilize the fragile Plantagenet succession. A protracted civil conflict would also deplete the royal treasury needed for his ongoing military campaigns in France. The restoration of royal authority proceeded with decisive military action rather than personal vengeance. Richard focused his efforts on reclaiming the rebellious territories and castles held by John's allies. The formidable Nottingham Castle, a symbol of the insurrection, fell after a brief siege. This demonstration of power effectively crushed the remaining resistance. By reasserting control over these strategic points, Richard sent a clear message of his restored authority without needing to make an example of his brother. The episode concluded with John's lands being temporarily confiscated, though he was soon received back into the king's court, a move that prioritized dynastic stability over retribution. With the kingdom's internal affairs now settled, attention could turn to the broader scope of Richard's reign. Richard the Lionheart's actual time residing in England after his return was remarkably brief. Following the suppression of his brother John's rebellion, the king focused on consolidating royal authority and refilling the kingdom's depleted coffers. His stay, lasting only a few months, was intensely administrative. He implemented significant legal and financial reforms to strengthen the crown's position. One key measure was the issuance of new ordinances for the exchequer, aimed at improving revenue collection and curbing corruption. Research has shown these reforms were designed to create a more reliable and centralized financial system, ensuring a steady flow of funds to the royal treasury. The king's primary interests, however, remained firmly on the continent. Historians note his deep investment in the Angevin Empire's continental territories, which he considered the heart of his power. England was often viewed by Richard as a vital source of financial and military support for his continental ambitions, rather than a kingdom requiring his personal prolonged presence. This perspective explains his swift departure. After securing the loyalty of his barons and stabilizing the administration, Richard made final preparations to leave. His final departure for Normandy occurred in May 1194. The king sailed from Portsmouth, never to set foot in England again. This decisive move underscored his lifelong prioritization of his French domains and his ongoing military campaigns there. Some scholars argue this absence fundamentally shaped the later development of English governance, as the machinery of state continued to function in the king's name while he ruled from afar. His English residence, though short, was a period of critical reorganization for the kingdom he would ultimately govern from a distance. Yet this strategic absence would soon be tested by a challenge emerging from the continent, one that threatened the very foundations of his distant rule. The conflict between Richard the Lionheart and Philip Augustus of France represented a pivotal struggle for control over key continental territories. Tensions centered on regions like the Vexin, Berry, and Auvergne, with the formidable fortress of Cettu-Galad serving as the linchpin of Richard's defensive network. Philip systematically targeted these lands, aiming to dismantle the Angevin Empire piece by piece. His strategy relied on swift sieges and exploiting local allegiances. Richard countered with a strategy of rapid mobilization and fortress warfare. He invested heavily in strengthening castles, making them nearly impregnable to the military technology of the era. Modern analysis reveals his campaigns were characterized by sudden, forceful responses to French incursions. The fighting was intense, with control of towns like Tours and parts of Normandy constantly shifting. One chronicler wrote, "The land was in a state of perpetual alarm." Diplomatic efforts produced only fleeting respites. A temporary truce was brokered in January 1199, but it collapsed within months as mutual distrust prevailed. Some historians argue Philip's ambitions were the primary driver, while others point to Richard's own assertive policies as equally provocative. The war drained both kingdoms' resources, yet neither monarch was willing to concede. This prolonged stalemate set the stage for the conflict's dramatic continuation under Richard's successor, defining a generation of Anglo-French hostility. Amid this costly stalemate, Richard turned to a monumental defensive project that would become his most enduring military legacy. King Richard the Lionheart began constructing Cettu-Galad in 1197. This massive fortress rose on a strategic cliff overlooking the Seine River. Its primary purpose was to secure the border of his Norman territories against the French king. Richard needed a powerful stronghold to control river traffic and block potential invasions. The entire project was completed with remarkable speed, taking only around 2 years. The castle's design was highly innovative for its time. It featured a unique concentric layout with multiple defensive walls. The formidable inner keep was protected by a complex system of ditches and outer baileys. Its most distinctive element was a sharp, wedge-shaped wall facing the likely direction of attack. This design was intended to deflect projectiles and make scaling the walls nearly impossible. Modern analysis shows these features represented a significant evolution in European military architecture. Controlling this point on the Seine was of immense strategic importance. The river served as a vital commercial and military artery into the heart of Normandy. By building his fortress there, Richard could effectively choke off access to the region. He could prevent enemy ships from moving upstream and protect the land route to his capital, Rouen. This gave him a decisive advantage in dominating the contested Vexin territory. So confident was Richard in his new fortress that he reportedly boasted of its strength. Chroniclers recorded his famous statement about the castle's perceived invulnerability. "How beautiful she is, this daughter of 1 year," he is said to have exclaimed. Another version of his quote claims he declared, "Were its walls made of butter, they would still hold." These words underscored his belief that Cettu-Galad was essentially impregnable, a masterpiece of defensive engineering built in an astonishingly short time. Yet this confidence in stone walls would soon be tested by the relentless campaigns unfolding across his lands. Richard the Lionheart's military successes continued unabated from 1194. His campaigns were marked by a series of swift and effective operations against King Philip Augustus of France. In 1194, he achieved a significant victory at the Battle of Frey-Tevel, where his forces outmaneuvered the French, capturing their baggage train and treasury. This engagement forced Philip into a temporary retreat, allowing Richard to consolidate his hold on contested lands. The following years saw the relentless king press his advantage. He conducted successful sieges, including the capture of the formidable castle of Loches in 1195. His military effectiveness remained undiminished despite his advancing age. He was in his late 30s, an era when many contemporary commanders might have slowed their campaigns. Modern analysis reveals his adaptability was key, employing a mix of rapid cavalry assaults and sophisticated siege engineering to overcome his adversaries. However, this constant state of warfare placed an immense and growing strain on the royal treasury. Financing near-annual campaigns required vast sums of money. Historians note that the heavy taxation needed to fund his armies and fortifications began to foster discontent among his subjects. The financial demands of maintaining a powerful military machine, while successful on the battlefield, were slowly draining the resources of his domains, creating a precarious foundation for his continued rule. In early 1199, a peasant plowing fields near Cierlas in the Viscounty of Limoges uncovered a remarkable treasure. Historical accounts describe a hoard of gold figures, perhaps ancient statues or religious artifacts. By the rigid customs of feudal law, such a discovery on a vassal's land was a complex matter. While the peasant and his immediate lord, Viscount Aymar V of Limoges, had certain rights, the ultimate overlord was King Richard I of England, the Duke of Aquitaine. Research has shown that feudal obligations were a web of shared entitlements, and Richard, as a supreme lord, claimed a significant portion of the find. Viscount Aymar, however, refused to surrender the king's share. This was not merely greed but a calculated challenge to Richard's authority in a region long resistant to ducal control. Some interpretations suggest Aymar believed the treasure was entirely his by local right, while others posit he was testing the king's power. Enraged by this defiance and the breach of feudal contract, Richard the Lionheart saw it as an insult that could not be ignored. He immediately mobilized a small force and marched to besiege Aymar's modest castle of Cierlas in late March. The siege itself was a minor military affair, a sharp contrast to the vast campaigns Richard had waged in the Holy Land and against Philip III of France. The castle was garrisoned by only a handful of men. Yet, this obscure quarrel over treasure would have a consequence far outweighing its scale. It was during this siege, while inspecting the defenses without his full armor, that a crossbow bolt struck the king. The crossbow bolt that struck him led to 11 days of dying. This fatal moment had been set in motion just days earlier, when the king's fateful journey toward Cierlas began. On the evening of March 26, 1199, a moment of fatal complacency unfolded. King Richard the Lionheart, inspecting his siege lines at the castle of Cierlas, moved with a casual disregard for danger. He strolled without his full suit of armor, a decision that would prove catastrophic. The twilight offered little protection, and the king became a clear target for the defenders on the walls. From the battlements, a lone crossbowman took aim. Historical accounts identify him as Peter Basil, though some sources suggest the name may be a later invention. His motivation was not personal animosity but a soldier's duty to defend his besieged castle. The bolt he loosed flew with deadly accuracy. It struck the king in the left shoulder, near the base of his neck. Richard initially tried to downplay the injury, returning to his tent on his own power. Back in his quarters, the initial assessment of the wound began. The king's own men attempted to remove the bolt, but the operation was crude and incomplete. They broke the shaft, leaving the iron head embedded deep in the flesh. While there was no immediate, catastrophic bleeding, the true gravity of the situation soon became apparent. The wound was not clean, and the depths of the penetration suggested vital areas might have been affected. This seemingly minor injury from a common soldier would set in motion a chain of events leading to the king's demise. What began as a single moment of impact would now stretch into a slow, agonizing countdown. The gangrene infection spread relentlessly through King Richard's body over 11 days. Modern analysis suggests the initial wound, combined with medieval medical practices, created a perfect environment for the sepsis to advance. His physical decline was gradual but undeniable, moving from favor and localized pain to systemic failure. By the first days of April, his strength was clearly ebbing away. With death approaching, the king turned his mind to securing his legacy. He designated his brother John as his primary heir, a decision met with apprehension by some of his barons. He made specific arrangements for his territories, including Normandy and England, aiming to ensure a stable transition of power. Crucially, he also provided for his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, securing her position and influence. In a remarkable act during his final hours, Richard summoned the crossbowman who had fired the fatal bolt. Instead of ordering a brutal execution, the king granted him a full pardon. He even gave the young man a gift of money and ordered his release. This surprising mercy, documented by several chroniclers, stands in stark contrast to his warrior reputation. Richard the Lionheart died on April 6, 1199, at the age of 41. His death was not on a battlefield but in his mother's arms at Chalice Castle. The immediate aftermath saw his body subjected to the medieval process of mos teutonicus, where his flesh was buried locally and his bones transported for interment. His heart was sent to Rouen Cathedral, a final testament to the king whose life was defined by both his crusading zeal and the complex legacy he left behind. News of King Richard I's death in April 1199 sent shockwaves across Christendom and the Muslim world. In Europe, chronicles recorded widespread grief and genuine alarm. The French court, however, viewed the passing of its formidable rival with a sense of political relief. In the Middle East, the reaction was more measured, colored by the respect he had earned during the Third Crusade. The great Muslim leader Saladin had earlier formed a distinct opinion of the English king. While their forces were locked in a bitter struggle, Saladin reportedly acknowledged Richard's immense personal courage and his exceptional talents as a military commander. He considered him the most remarkable commander of the age, though he also noted his perceived recklessness. Contemporary Christian chroniclers echoed this dual assessment, creating a complex portrait of the monarch. Writers like Roger of Howden lavishly praised his martial prowess, his strategic mind, and his heroic presence on the battlefield. They celebrated his near-mythical strength and his unwavering commitment to the crusading cause. Yet, these same sources frequently criticized his governance. Many noted he treated his English kingdom primarily as a source of revenue for his military campaigns. One chronicler wrote that he would have sold London itself if he could have found a buyer. His long absences, totaling only about 6 months of his 10-year reign actually spent in England, were seen as a neglect of his royal duties at home. The king's sudden death created an immediate and severe succession crisis. Richard died without a legitimate direct heir. His vast Angevin empire, spanning from England to vast territories in modern-day France, was suddenly leaderless. His younger brother, Joe, moved swiftly to claim the English crown, though his right was not entirely uncontested. Their nephew, Arthur of Brittany, also had a strong legal claim supported by many powerful barons, and crucially by King Philip II of France. This division plunged the continental territories into a period of intense conflict and instability, marking a decisive turning point that would ultimately lead to the empire's fragmentation in the following years. But how much of this imperial collapse can truly be attributed to the king's physical absence from his domains? The popular image of Richard the Lionheart as an eternally absent king requires careful historical examination. While he spent the majority of his reign outside England, the actual statistics are revealing. Research indicates he spent approximately 6 months of his 10-year reign on English soil. This period was concentrated between his coronation in 1189 and his departure for the Third Crusade in 1190. The subsequent years, until his brief return in 1194, saw his complete physical absence, fueling the modern perception of a disinterested monarch. This absence was managed by a sophisticated and largely effective administrative system. Key figures like William Longchamp and Hubert Walter governed as justiciars, wielding vice-regal authority. They presided over the royal courts, managed finances, and upheld the common law. The government did not stagnate. Records show the exchequer functioned continuously. And significant legal developments occurred. One chronicler noted the realm was governed with great care in this period, challenging the notion of total neglect. Later historical assessments have been profoundly shaped by this narrative. Victorian historians often contrasted his absences with the domestic focus of later rulers, framing him as a poor king for England. Modern analysis, however, offers a more nuanced view. Some scholars argue his role as a European prince and crusader was his primary identity, making his physical location less critical to Angevin governance. Others maintain that his frequent demands for crusade funding, like the Saladin teeth, placed immense strain on the kingdom he so rarely visited. The debate continues to balance his international fame against the domestic realities of his rule. Yet despite his controversial absence from England, Richard's military genius would leave an enduring physical legacy through revolutionary engineering. Richard the Lionheart fundamentally reshaped medieval warfare through his innovative siegecraft and fortification designs. During the Third Crusade, he personally supervised the construction of massive trebuchets. Like the famed Bad Neighbor, which could hurl stones weighing over 100 kilograms. His engineers perfected counterweight trebuchet designs, making them more powerful and accurate than earlier traction models. These engines proved decisive at the Siege of Acre in 1191, systematically dismantling the city's formidable walls. His approach to siege warfare combined relentless artillery bombardment with coordinated assaults, setting a new standard for besieging fortified cities. In castle architecture, Richard's most famous contribution was Château Gaillard in Normandy, completed around 1198. This fortress incorporated revolutionary defensive features. Its complex layout included concentric walls, eliminating blind spots for defenders. The inner ward featured a unique elliptical shape and advanced machicolations, allowing defenders to drop projectiles directly on attackers at the base of the walls. Historians note this design rendered traditional siege ladders and towers almost useless. The castle was considered virtually impregnable for its time, a direct result of Richard's experiences confronting formidable fortifications in the Holy Land. The king's military influence extended well beyond his lifetime. His meticulous use of combined arms integrating infantry, cavalry and siege engineers into a cohesive force was studied by later commanders. Analysis shows his emphasis on disciplined infantry to support cavalry charges influenced 13th century European tactics. The Crusade experience under his command demonstrated the importance of secure supply lines and adaptable strategies, lessons that filtered back to European battlefields. While some scholars debate the extent of his personal innovations, most agree his practical application of military technology left an indelible mark, shaping the conduct of war for the next century. Yet while his military legacy reshaped the very nature of warfare, his personal legend was simultaneously being forged in a very different arena. Richard the Lionheart's cultural journey began in medieval romances, where chroniclers like Ambroise idealized his crusading exploits. By the Victorian era, Sir Walter Scott's novel Ivanhoe, published in 1819, cemented a new image. It portrayed Richard as a heroic, returning king within the Robin Hood narrative. This connection, however, is a complete historical fabrication. Research has shown Robin Hood's legends emerged later, and the two figures never interacted. The real King Richard spent only about 6 months of his 10-year reign in England, a fact often omitted in these romantic tales. The 20th century transported the king to the screen. Early silent films gave way to major Hollywood productions. The Technicolor adventure, The Adventures of Robin Hood, from 1938 featured a brief, noble Richard. Later portrayals became more nuanced. The 1991 film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves presented a darker, more cynical monarch. Television series have continued this exploration, with shows like the BBC's Robin Hood revisiting his character. Why does this particular king remain so compelling? Analysis suggests his appeal lies in a powerful archetypal duality. He embodies the idealized warrior king, a figure of immense personal courage and military prowess. Simultaneously, his prolonged absence from his kingdom creates a narrative vacuum filled with legend and mystery. This combination of celebrated strength and physical remoteness allows his story to be endlessly adapted. He functions as a versatile symbol of both ultimate royal authority and the potential perils of a distracted crown, ensuring his place in the modern imagination. In the year 1172, Richard was formally installed as the Duke of Aquitaine. This appointment by his mother, Eleanor, secured his position over one of medieval Europe's wealthiest and most culturally vibrant regions. Aquitaine's strategic location, with its long Atlantic coastline and key trade routes, made it a cornerstone of the Angevin Empire's power. Its court was a renowned center for Trabatta poetry and chivalric culture, adding immense prestige to the title. As Duke, Richard immediately embarked on a series of administrative and military actions. He moved to consolidate his authority by reforming local governance and reinforcing key fortifications. His early years were dominated by military campaigns to suppress rebellious nobles in the region, such as in the county of Angulf-Me. These conflicts, though demanding, served as a crucial training ground. Through these sustained efforts, Richard began building his formidable reputation as a military commander. His relentless energy and strategic acumen in the field became widely noted by contemporaries. Chroniclers of the time started documenting his tactical prowess, laying the foundation for the legendary status he would later achieve. His experiences in Aquitaine provided the essential foundation for his future role as a central leader of the Third Crusade. Yet this legendary status would soon face its first true test, one that would reveal a darker aspect of his celebrated military genius. Richard the Lionheart faced immediate challenges upon securing his position in Aquitaine. Rebellious southern nobles, sensing opportunity, rose against their young duke. Richard responded with a series of swift and decisive campaigns, demonstrating the military prowess that would define his reign. His objective was to crush all dissent and solidify his control over the volatile region. The siege of Talabog Castle in the year 1188 became a defining moment. Chronicler Roger of Hoveden documented the event, noting Richard's personal bravery. The king reportedly led the assault himself, crossing the moat and scaling the walls under a hail of projectiles. This direct action forced the garrison's surrender and broke the backbone of the rebellion. Other strongholds, including the castle of Pons, fell in quick succession, their defenders overwhelmed by Richard's relentless tactics. His reputation for military brilliance grew, yet it was shadowed by accounts of severity. Contemporary sources present a complex picture. The same chroniclers who praised his strategic genius also recorded acts of stark brutality, such as the execution of rebellious knights and the systematic destruction of their lands. One account states he showed no mercy to those who betrayed their oath. This duality created a powerful, fearsome image. Some historians argue this calculated harshness was necessary to impose order, while others believe it sowed lasting resentment. Through these campaigns, Richard not only quelled the revolts but also forged his legend as a commander both admired and feared. Family conflicts reached their breaking point in the 1180s. The relationship between Richard and his father, King Henry II, deteriorated into open hostility. This was fueled by the ambitions of Richard's elder brother, young Henry. Historical analysis reveals that young Henry, crowned as a junior king but lacking real power, grew increasingly resentful. He desired direct control over the lands promised to him. This simmering discontent exploded into a major rebellion in 1183. Young Henry, joined by his brother Geoffrey and supported by the French king, turned against their father. The rebellion of 1183 was a brutal affair. Young Henry ravaged the town of Limoges, challenging his father's authority directly. However, his campaign ended abruptly. In June of that same year, young Henry contracted dysentery and died. He was only 28 years old. His sudden death was a pivotal moment. It removed a primary rival and dramatically altered the line of succession. Richard, as the next eldest surviving son, was now the undisputed heir to the English throne. This position, however, did not bring peace with his father. The final confrontation between Richard and Henry II occurred in 1189. By this time, Richard had formed a powerful alliance with Philip II of France. Contemporary chroniclers noted the king's profound despair upon seeing his son's name on a list of rebels. Some historians believe Henry II was broken by this ultimate betrayal. The conflict was both military and deeply personal. Forced into submission, the ailing king met Richard near Balen. He agreed to all of Richard's demands, naming him his sole heir. Henry II died just 2 days later in July 1189, a broken man. This final act cemented Richard's path to becoming King of England. This final surrender came only after a series of military defeats that had left Henry isolated and his authority in tatters. The final military campaign against Henry II began in the summer of 1189. His son Richard, allied with King Philip II of France, launched a swift and devastating offensive. They captured key strongholds like Le Mans and Tours, demonstrating the collapse of Henry's support among his own barons. Facing this overwhelming force and widespread defection, the ailing king had no viable path to victory. His power base crumbled in a matter of weeks, forcing him to seek terms. The two sides met at Balen near Tours in early July. There, the emotionally shattered Henry II was presented with a list of his adversaries. To his profound shock, the name of his youngest son, John, was among them. This final betrayal broke his spirit completely. He formally accepted all demands, publicly recognizing Richard as his sole heir. Contemporaries described the defeated king as a broken man, his will to live extinguished by this ultimate act of familial disloyalty. Henry II died just 2 days later at the Château de Chinon on July 6, 1189. He was 56 years old. Historical accounts note that Richard's reaction upon viewing his father's body was one of stark silence, a moment heavy with the complex legacy of their conflict. This succession marked a pivotal shift. Richard the Lionheart's immediate priority became financing and launching the Third Crusade, redirecting the vast resources of the Angevin Empire from internal consolidation to a grand external holy war. The crown passed decisively, but the realm's focus turned outward, altering the political landscape of Western Europe. Yet this grand new era would begin with a coronation whose magnificent pageantry would conceal a deeply troubling undercurrent. On the 3rd of September, in the year 1189, Richard the Lionheart was crowned King of England in a magnificent ceremony at Westminster Abbey. The event was marked by immense grandeur, symbolizing the unity and power of the realm. However, historical analysis has revealed a somber note. A subsequent massacre of Jewish individuals occurred in London, casting a dark shadow over the day's celebrations. This tragic event highlighted the deep religious tensions of the era. Following his coronation, Richard moved swiftly to consolidate his power and fund his ambitious goal, the Third Crusade. He began a comprehensive restructuring of the royal administration, appointing trusted loyalists to key positions. To raise the vast sums required for his campaign, the king implemented controversial financial measures. He was famously quoted as saying he would sell London itself if he could find a buyer, demonstrating his singular focus. These actions included selling official titles, lands, and privileges. His preparations were meticulous and relentless. Richard focused on securing the English coastline and organizing a formidable fleet and army. He appointed regents to govern in his absence, ensuring stability while he embarked on his holy mission. Within just a few months of his coronation, his primary objective shifted entirely from domestic rule to crusading, setting the stage for his long absence from England. His early reign was thus almost entirely defined by the impending campaign to reclaim Jerusalem. But such a grand campaign would demand a price beyond mere ambition, a cost that would soon test the very foundations of his kingdom. Financing the Third Crusade required a staggering sum, and King Richard pursued this goal with methods that shocked his contemporaries. He initiated a massive sale of royal assets, putting official titles, sheriffdoms, and vast tracts of crown land on the open market. Historical accounts note he even declared he would sell the city of London if he could find a buyer, a statement revealing his desperate resolve. This aggressive fundraising was coupled with a severe tax known as the Saladin tithe, which demanded 1/10 of all movable property from most of his subjects. The logistical mobilization was as immense as the financial one. Throughout 1189 and 1190, English ports buzzed with activity as a fleet was assembled. Chronicles suggest over 100 ships were gathered, requiring enormous quantities of provisions, securing supplies like salted meat, grain, and thousands of horses for the knights became a monumental administrative task. The entire operation was a calculated gamble, leveraging the kingdom's immediate wealth for a distant holy war. Modern analysis reveals these actions were highly controversial. Some scholars argue they were pragmatic necessities for a large-scale military expedition, while others point to the long-term weakening of the royal treasury and the alienation of his barons. The preparations demonstrated Richard's singular focus, transforming England into a logistical base for a conflict thousands of miles away, with consequences that would echo long after his departure for the Holy Land. Yet even as England became a war machine, events unfolding in the Holy Land would render all such preparations a race against a looming, irreversible disaster. The sacred city of Jerusalem fell to the forces of Saladin in early October of the year 1187. This event sent a seismic shockwave throughout Christian Europe. The loss of the spiritual heart of the Crusader states was not just a military defeat, but a profound spiritual catastrophe. For the first time in nearly 9 decades, the Holy City was back under Muslim control. Shattering the legacy of the First Crusade, Pope Gregory VIII responded with urgency, issuing a papal bull known as the Audita Tremendi. He framed the loss as divine punishment for the sins of Christendom and called for a new Grand Crusade. The call to arms was a direct appeal to the kings and knights of Europe to reclaim the lost territories. This plea for a Third Crusade was designed to unite the often fractious European nobility under a single sacred banner. The strategic situation in the Holy Land was dire for the Crusaders. Following his decisive victory at the Battle of Hattin months earlier, Saladin had systematically captured key coastal cities and strongholds. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was reduced to a few beleaguered outposts, most notably the city of Tyre. This port city, fiercely defended, became the crucial beachhead and rallying point for any European counteroffensive. Initial European responses were swift but fragmented. The Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick Barbarossa, a legendary figure, was the first major monarch to take the cross, mobilizing a massive army for an overland march. Meanwhile, the kings of France and England, Philip II and Henry II, agreed to lead their own forces, though their long-standing rivalry complicated preparations. These early movements set the stage for a monumental conflict, one that would eventually be defined by the arrival of a new and formidable commander, Richard the Lionheart. Yet as these grand alliances formed across Europe, the true test would lie in the treacherous journey ahead and the unforeseen challenges that would forge a legend. In the summer of 1190, Richard the Lionheart embarked on his long-awaited crusade. He departed from England alongside Philip II of France, their alliance a strategic necessity for the Third Crusade. Their massive fleet assembled, a formidable force of over 100 ships carrying thousands of soldiers, knights, and supplies. The initial leg of their Mediterranean journey took them south, skirting the coast of Portugal before steering into the open sea. The first major stop was the island of Sicily, where they arrived in September of 1190. Richard's arrival was complicated by local politics. His sister Joan, the widow of the former king, was being held by the new ruler Tancred. Negotiations for her release and her dowry began immediately. Research indicates these talks were tense, with Richard leveraging his military presence to secure favorable terms. He ultimately succeeded in securing Joan's freedom and a substantial payment of gold, an event that significantly bolstered his war chest. This Sicilian interlude, however, sowed the seeds of discord with his French ally. The negotiations revealed Richard's assertive and independent nature, which clashed with Philip's more cautious approach. Some historians believe Philip grew increasingly wary of Richard's growing power and ambition. The prolonged stay on the island strained their partnership, creating a rift that would widen as their journey continued toward the Holy Land. This tension marked a critical shift from their initial cooperative venture into a more competitive and fragile alliance. In late April 1191, a ferocious Mediterranean storm scattered Richard the Lionheart's Crusader fleet. Several ships, including one carrying his sister Joanna and his betrothed, Berengaria of Navarre, were driven violently onto the coast of Cyprus. This unforeseen event set the stage for a dramatic confrontation. The island was then ruled by Isaac Komnenos, a Byzantine prince who had declared independence from Constantinople. Komnenos, seeing an opportunity for plunder or ransom, initially imprisoned the shipwrecked survivors and refused to return the treasure from a wrecked English vessel. Richard's response was swift and decisive. He immediately sailed to the port of Limassol with the bulk of his fleet, demanding the release of his people and their possessions. When Komnenos refused and assembled his army on the plains outside the city, battle became inevitable. On the 1st of May, Richard's highly disciplined knights, though outnumbered, crushed the separate forces in a brief but brutal engagement. Komnenos fled to the interior, but the conquest was far from over. Richard pursued him relentlessly across the island, capturing major strongholds with astonishing speed. The entire island was subdued in a matter of weeks, a testament to Richard's military prowess. This rapid victory had immense strategic value. Cyprus provided a crucial and secure supply base for the Crusader armies, a stable source of food and water, and a strategic outpost for controlling the sea lanes to the Holy Land. It was during this whirlwind campaign that Richard married Berengaria of Navarre in the chapel of Limassol's fortress. This ceremony, held on the 12th of May, was not merely a romantic interlude. Scholars note it solidified a key political alliance and formally established Berengaria as Queen of England, a coronation performed in the heart of a newly conquered Christian territory, marking a triumphant start to his crusade. Yet this triumphant beginning in Cyprus stood in stark contrast to the grim reality awaiting him at his ultimate destination. In June 1191, Richard the Lionheart finally arrived at the besieged city of Acre. His fleet cast long shadows on the water after a long and perilous sea voyage. The city had been under a brutal Christian siege for 2 full years, a grinding conflict that had exhausted both attackers and defenders. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and decay, a testament to the stalemate. The political landscape was incredibly complex. The Crusader camp was a fractured alliance of French, German, and various local Levantine forces. Historical analysis reveals deep rivalries, particularly between King Richard and Philip Guitave of France. Each leader pursued their own strategic objectives, making unified command a constant challenge. Some chroniclers wrote of a camp divided by ambition, even as they faced a common enemy. Acre's strategic value was immense. Controlling this key port meant securing a vital lifeline for men and supplies from Europe. Without it, any march toward Jerusalem was strategically untenable. The city was the essential gateway to the Holy Land's interior. Its fall would open inside the walls, The Muslim garrison and citizens were nearing their breaking point after the long blockade. Outside, the Crusader forces were also ravaged by disease and infighting. Research indicates that morale was perilously low on both sides. The arrival of the English king and his fresh troops shattered the fragile equilibrium, injecting a new and decisive force into the bloody deadlock. But how did this new force manage to break the city's stalwart defenses? During the siege of Acre, Richard the Lionheart deployed formidable military engineering innovations. His forces constructed massive trebuchets, including one famously nicknamed Bad Neighbor. These counterweight machines hurled stones weighing hundreds of pounds, systematically battering the city's formidable walls. Contemporary chroniclers noted the terrifying impact of these engines, with one observer writing, "The walls shook under the relentless bombardment." The psychological effect on the defenders was as significant as the physical damage. Alongside the artillery barrage, Richard's engineers executed sophisticated mining operations. Sappers dug tunnels beneath the city's fortifications, supporting them with wooden props. These chambers were then filled with combustible materials and ignited, collapsing the tunnels and bringing down sections of the wall above. This method required precise timing and coordination with the surface assaults. The constant threat of underground attacks forced the garrison to countermine, leading to desperate subterranean clashes between the opposing forces. A crucial element of the siege's success was the coordination between land and sea forces. Richard's fleet maintained a tight naval blockade, preventing any relief or supplies from reaching the city by water. This stranglehold complemented the land army's pressure, creating an inescapable ring around Acre. The chronicler Ambroise described the intensity, writing of the sea filled with ships and the land with tents, a sight to bring despair. The combined pressure from these relentless assaults on multiple fronts ultimately proved decisive, leading to the city's capitulation in July of 1191 after a grueling 2-year siege. While the military pressure proved decisive, the human story within Acre's walls reveals the personal toll of this prolonged conflict. After a grueling 2-year siege, Acre's formidable defenses finally crumbled in July 1191. The city's garrison, exhausted and cut off from relief, negotiated its surrender directly with King Richard the Lionheart. The terms were meticulously recorded by chroniclers. Saladin's representatives agreed to a massive ransom for the lives of the Muslim soldiers and civilians within the city. This ransom was set at 200,000 gold dinars. The Crusaders also demanded the return of the relic of the True Cross lost at Hattin and the release of around 1,500 Christian prisoners. A tense truce was established to facilitate this complex exchange. However, the agreement's implementation descended into chaos. Saladin, facing logistical and financial strain, delayed the payments and the return of prisoners. After weeks of waiting, Richard the Lionheart made a fateful decision. On the 20th of August, just outside the city walls, his soldiers systematically executed an estimated 2,700 Muslim prisoners. This act remains one of the most controversial episodes of the Third Crusade. Some historians argue it was a brutal necessity to deny Saladin a future army and to enable the Crusader march south. Others contend it was a catastrophic miscalculation that poisoned negotiations for years and cemented Richard's reputation for ruthlessness in Islamic chronicles. The capture of Acre provided the Crusaders with their first major strategic victory. It secured a vital deep-water port, ensuring a steady flow of reinforcements and supplies from Europe. The city became the new capital of the truncated Kingdom of Jerusalem for over a century. Politically, the victory solidified Richard's leadership of the crusade and delivered a significant blow to Saladin's aura of invincibility. Yet the massacre's aftermath cast a long shadow. It galvanized Muslim resistance, making subsequent diplomatic solutions nearly impossible. The military success at Acre thus created a paradoxical legacy, offering a crucial foothold while simultaneously deepening the conflict's intractable nature. The campaign could now push south toward Jerusalem, but the path forward was stained with blood and mutual distrust. Yet this very success forced a fateful decision about how to proceed, a choice that would test the limits of their hard-won victory. King Richard the Lionheart made a crucial strategic choice during the Third Crusade in the late 12th century. He decided to march his army south along the Palestinian coast from Acre to Jaffa. This coastal advance, beginning in August of the year 1191, was selected over a risky inland route. Historians note this provided a major logistical advantage by keeping his forces within reach of the Christian fleet. The ships sailed parallel to the army's march, acting as a floating supply depot. This naval support was fundamental to the campaign's viability. The fleet continuously provided fresh troops food and crucial equipment like timber for siege engines. It also served as a secure evacuation route for the wounded. This constant resupply allowed Richard to avoid the vulnerabilities of overland supply chains, which were highly susceptible to raids. Analysis of campaign records shows this symbiotic land-sea movement was a key innovation. The army's progress was deliberately slow and methodical. Richard maintained a careful pace to ensure his infantry could protect the supply trains and to keep the formation linked to the fleet. This deliberate movement, however, invited constant harassment. Saladin's mobile forces engaged in daily skirmishes, testing the Crusader lines and attempting to break their discipline. The most significant of these engagements was the Battle of Arsuf in September 1191, where Richard's forces successfully repelled a major assault. This relentless pressure defined the arduous coastal march. This victory at Arsuf now prompted Richard to refine his defensive strategy, leading to meticulous preparations for the continuing march. As the Crusader army marched south in early September 1191, its formation became a mobile fortress. Richard arranged his forces in 3 parallel columns hugging the coastline. The left flank, protected by the sea, consisted of English and Norman knights. The center column held the vital baggage train and infantry. The right flank, facing the open plain and constant threat, was held by Templars, Hospitallers, and French knights. This careful disposition was a direct response to the unrelenting hit-and-run tactics of Saladin's mounted archers. To counter this harassment, King Richard imposed iron discipline. He strictly forbade impulsive charges, ordering his crossbowmen and infantry to maintain a steady, shielded march. Historical accounts describe how crossbowmen marched in turns, one row advanced while the other reloaded under cover, creating a continuous defensive screen. This methodical pace was designed to preserve the army's strength and cohesion, turning the march itself into a protracted defensive engagement. The goal was to reach Arsuf with a force still capable of a decisive battle. The approach to the plains of Arsuf presented a new danger. The army had to navigate a thin stretch of land between the dense forests of Arsuf and the Mediterranean shore. This geographical bottleneck compressed their formation, making the right flank even more vulnerable to concentrated attacks from the wooded areas. The narrowing terrain heightened the psychological strain on every soldier. For the Crusaders, the forest represented an unseen threat, while for the Muslim army, the disciplined advance of the Franks presented a formidable, unbreakable wall. Both sides understood that a major confrontation was now inevitable, yet neither side could have anticipated how the battle would actually begin, or which army would make the first, decisive move. The Battle of Arsuf erupted on the 7th of September in the year 1191. Muslim forces initiated the engagement with relentless attacks from the rear, employing hit-and-run tactics and showers of arrows. They sought to break the Crusader column's cohesion and provoke a premature, disorganized charge. King Richard the Lionheart, however, maintained iron control over his army's movements. He understood that timing was everything, repeatedly issuing orders for the infantry and cavalry to hold their formation and resist the instinct to counterattack immediately. His strategy was to let the enemy exhaust themselves against the Crusaders' disciplined ranks. Eyewitness accounts describe the fighting's ferocious intensity. One chronicler wrote, "The air was so thick with arrows that the sky seemed to darken." The pressure on the rear guard held by the Knights Hospitaller became almost unbearable. Mounted knights saw their horses struck down, and the constant strain pushed human endurance to its limit. Twice, perhaps 3 times, discipline nearly shattered as individual knights broke ranks to charge without permission, only to be sternly recalled. The air vibrated with the screams of men and animals, the clash of steel, and the thrum of countless projectiles. The pivotal moment arrived when the master of the Hospitallers, unable to withstand further losses, reportedly initiated a charge. This spontaneous action forced Richard's hand. Seizing the opportunity, he ordered a general countercharge, transforming a potential breakdown into a coordinated, overwhelming assault. The full weight of the Frankish cavalry, a wall of steel and horseflesh, then crashed into the Muslim lines. This decisive maneuver, executed at the king's command, turned the tide completely. The enemy ranks broke under the sudden, concentrated force, securing a vital victory for the crusading army and cementing Richard's reputation as a brilliant battlefield commander. Yet this hard-won victory on the battlefield soon gave way to a far more complex challenge of grand strategy. The march toward Jerusalem in the summer of 1192 presented a profound strategic puzzle. A Attacking the heavily fortified Holy City required immense resources and perfect timing. Research has shown that supply lines stretching back to the coastal city of Jaffa were dangerously long and vulnerable. Muslim forces constantly harassed these routes, making the steady flow of food and equipment nearly impossible. Furthermore, the intense summer heat and scarce water sources posed a severe threat to a large besieging army and its horses. Within the Crusader command, a deep division emerged over the correct course of action. Some leaders, like the Templars, argued for an immediate, decisive assault. They believed momentum was crucial and that Saladin's forces were weakened. Others, including many French nobles, advocated for caution. They pointed to the failed siege of the previous year and the immense logistical dangers. This disagreement created a paralyzed command structure with no clear consensus on how to proceed. King Richard responded to this deadlock by personally leading reconnaissance missions toward Jerusalem. On at least 2 occasions, he and a small party of knights ventured close enough to see the city's walls. One chronicler wrote, "He could see the holy towers, but knew he could not seize them." These missions confirmed his worst fears. The terrain was difficult, water was scarce, and the defenses were formidable. The intelligence gathered made a successful siege appear unlikely before the autumn rains began, forcing a heartbreaking strategic withdrawal and cementing one of history's great military dilemmas. Yet from this moment of strategic retreat emerged a bold new approach that would redefine the entire campaign. King Richard the Lionheart made a pivotal decision in the spring of 1192. Instead of marching his forces directly on Jerusalem, he committed his entire army to the immense task of rebuilding the fortifications of Ascalon. This ancient port city, lying south of Jaffa, was in ruins. The king ordered every soldier, from knights to archers, to participate in the reconstruction. Chronicles from the era describe a massive, coordinated effort where men hauled stones, cleared rubble, and raised new walls. The entire Crusader host became, for a time, a legion of laborers. The strategic reasoning behind this move was multifaceted. Control of Ascalon secured the coastal road from Egypt, effectively cutting off vital supply and reinforcement routes for Saladin's forces. Historians note that a fortified Ascalon served as a permanent strategic thorn in the side of the Ayyubid Sultanate, protecting the Kingdom of Jerusalem's southern flank. Some modern analyses suggest Richard believed a direct assault on the Holy City was too risky without this secure rear base. He aimed to create a durable stronghold from which future campaigns could be launched with greater security. This grand project had a profound dual impact. On one hand, the tangible labor boosted the army's morale through a shared, productive purpose. On the other hand, it created significant friction with allies, particularly the French contingent. Many Crusaders had journeyed for years with the singular goal of liberating Jerusalem. They viewed the construction work as a frustrating delay. Tensions simmered as some commanders argued the effort was a diversion from their sacred objective, revealing the fragile and often contentious nature of the crusading coalition. Yet even as internal divisions threatened their campaign from within, external pressures mounted through diplomatic channels. The diplomatic exchanges between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin represented a complex web of proposals and counteroffers throughout the summer and autumn of 1191. Initial negotiations, often facilitated by trusted intermediaries, explored various peace frameworks. Saladin's brother, Al-Adil, played a crucial role, with some proposals even suggesting a marriage alliance to solidify a treaty. One key offer involved Jerusalem remaining under Muslim control while granting Christian pilgrims access to the Holy City. Richard, in turn, proposed a partition where the coastal cities would belong to the Crusaders and the interior lands to Saladin. However, the core issue of Jerusalem's status proved insurmountable. Richard insisted on Christian control over the city or, at minimum, a defensible share of it, a condition Saladin consistently rejected. The Sultan was unwilling to cede the city that held profound religious significance for Islam. Furthermore, military calculations influenced both sides. Each leader believed their strategic position could be improved with time, leading to hardened stances. Richard's hope for reinforcements and Saladin's confidence in his supply lines created a diplomatic deadlock. The final collapse of negotiations can be attributed to this fundamental impasse over Jerusalem, compounded by mutual distrust. As one chronicler noted, neither party felt secure in the promises of the other. The failure of these intricate talks, despite the involvement of high-ranking family members, ultimately signaled that a military resolution was the only remaining path. The lengthy process demonstrated that even with sophisticated diplomatic channels, deeply entrenched religious and strategic interests could not be reconciled. With diplomacy exhausted, Richard now turned his full attention to the military campaign, setting the stage for a decisive final march. In June 1192, Richard the Lionheart launched his second and final advance toward Jerusalem. His army marched with renewed vigor, capturing key strongholds like Beit Nuba, a mere 12 miles from the Holy City. The sight of Jerusalem's distant walls ignited a powerful hope among the Crusaders, a belief that their sacred goal was finally within reach. Morale soared as they encamped, poised for what many believed would be the final, triumphant assault. However, this hope was swiftly tempered by harsh military realities. Recent analysis has revealed the Crusader army was dangerously overextended. Their supply lines were long and vulnerable to attacks from Saladin's forces. Furthermore, intelligence indicated the city's defenses had been significantly reinforced. A direct assault on such formidable fortifications with a depleted and weary force risked catastrophic failure. Simultaneously, Richard fell gravely ill with a fever, a personal crisis that weakened the army's command structure at this critical juncture. Facing immense pressure, Richard made the agonizing decision to retreat. The announcement crushed his soldiers, whose profound disappointment was recorded by chroniclers of the time. One wrote, "The army was overcome with immense grief." Yet strategic reasoning underpinned this difficult choice. Scholars argue that a failed siege would have destroyed the entire Crusader force, leaving the kingdom of Jerusalem defenseless. By withdrawing, Richard preserved his army to fight another day and secure the coastal territories, a move some historians now view as a pragmatic success despite its bitter disappointment. The dream of Jerusalem remained just that, a vision glimpsed but never grasped. Yet Richard's strategic withdrawal would soon be tested in ways no one could have anticipated, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic reversals of the entire campaign. In late July 1192, Saladin launched a devastating surprise assault on the coastal city of Jaffa. His forces overwhelmed the small garrison, seizing control of the town and forcing the remaining Crusader soldiers to retreat to the citadel. The situation appeared hopeless, with the defenders on the brink of surrender. Saladin's swift action threatened to dismantle the territorial gains made by the Crusader army and severely weaken their strategic position along the coast. News of the city's fall reached King Richard the Lionheart, who was encamped further north. He immediately organized a relief force and set sail, his small fleet cutting through the Mediterranean waves with urgent purpose. His dramatic sea arrival at Jaffa's harbor was a moment of high theater. Contemporary chronicles describe him leaping into the surf, leading his men from the front as they waded ashore under a hail of arrows. This immediate and fearless counterattack stunned Saladin's troops, who were scattered throughout the city, and provided a critical respite for the besieged defenders in the citadel. The defining moment of the battle followed shortly after. With only a handful of knights and crossbowmen rallied, Richard orchestrated a legendary defensive stand. Historical accounts, though varying in precise detail, consistently highlight a charge led by the king himself with just 54 knights. This small but disciplined force, a mix of cavalry and infantry, broke through the initial lines of the Ayyubid army. The shock of this audacious move against vastly superior numbers sowed confusion and demonstrated incredible martial prowess. This decisive victory at Jaffa had profound diplomatic consequences. It proved Richard's military dominance even with limited resources and exhausted men. The battle demonstrated to Saladin that the Crusader king could not be easily defeated, even when caught at a perceived disadvantage. This strengthened Richard's hand immensely during the subsequent negotiations. The renewed respect and military credibility forced from the conflict were key factors that led directly to the Treaty of Jaffa in September of that same year, securing a 3-year truce and guaranteeing Christian pilgrim access to Jerusalem. But what few anticipated were the secret clauses hidden within this hard-won peace, provisions that would reshape the region's power balance for years to come. In September 1192, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin's representatives finalized the Treaty of Ramleh, ending the Third Crusade's major hostilities. This agreement established a crucial 3-year truce, a breathing spell for both exhausted armies. The pact specifically guaranteed Christian pilgrims safe passage to Jerusalem, a key spiritual victory. While Muslim control over the Holy City remained, this access fulfilled a primary Crusader objective. The territorial divisions meticulously outlined in the treaty created a fragmented coastline. Richard's forces retained a thin but vital strip of land from Tyre to Jaffa. This ensured the Crusader states maintained a lifeline to Europe. Meanwhile, the strategically significant city of Ascalon was returned to Saladin, though its fortifications were to be dismantled. This compromise prevented either side from dominating the entire Levantine coast. A notable ceremonial conclusion to the negotiations involved a symbolic exchange of gifts. Richard presented expensive tokens to Al-Adil, Saladin's brother and chief negotiator. In a reciprocal gesture of respect, Al-Adil offered lavish gifts of his own to the English king. This ritual, as some historians note, underscored a mutual recognition of status beyond the battlefield. The treaty did not bring a final resolution, but it secured a fragile peace. This allowed for a temporary stability that defined the region's politics for the agreed-upon 3 years. Yet this hard-won stability would soon be tested by a journey fraught with unforeseen dangers. After securing a fragile truce in the Holy Land in the year 1192, King Richard the Lionheart faced a perilous return to England. Choosing the land route through Central Europe was a calculated risk. Historians note that sea travel was avoided due to the approaching treacherous winter storms and the significant threat posed by his enemies, who controlled the Mediterranean sea lanes. This decision, however, plunged him into a web of European political rivalries. His journey meant crossing territories of nobles who held deep grudges against him. The Duke of Austria, Leopold V, was personally insulted by Richard during the Crusade. Furthermore, the Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI was allied with Richard's rival, King Philip II of France. Research indicates that traveling through these lands was akin to walking into a lion's den. Every border crossing presented a potential trap, with local lords eager to capture the valuable royal prize. In a desperate attempt to avoid recognition, Richard and a small party adopted disguises, posing as humble pilgrims or merchants. Their route took them through the Alps and into the heart of Austria, heading towards lands held by his allies in Saxony. The plan was to move with speed and secrecy. However, near Vienna in December 1192, circumstances turned against him. Some accounts suggest his lavish spending or a recognizable signet ring betrayed his identity. He was apprehended in a small village near the city, ultimately being taken prisoner by Duke Leopold's men, an event that would spark an international crisis and a massive ransom effort. But the true consequences of his capture were only beginning to unfold, setting the stage for a complex political struggle. The capture of King Richard the Lionheart by Duke Leopold V of Austria in December 1192 marked a dramatic turn in the Crusader king's fate. Leopold, nursing a personal grudge from the siege of Acre, seized Richard near Vienna. The king was reportedly traveling in disguise, a risky gambit that ultimately failed. He was initially held at Durenstein Castle, a formidable fortress overlooking the Danube River. His confinement there was not in a dungeon, as later legends suggested, but under a watchful guard in relatively comfortable quarters, a fact confirmed by modern analysis of historical records. Within months, Leopold transferred his valuable prisoner to Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI. This move was both political and financial. Henry saw an opportunity to assert his authority over a rival and demanded an enormous ransom. The emperor levied formal charges against Richard, accusing him of conspiring to murder Conrad of Montferrat and of betraying the crusade. These proceedings were largely a legal facade to justify the immense ransom demand and to pressure the English treasury. Richard was then moved to various imperial strongholds, including Trifles Castle, known for its formidable security. Conditions here were significantly harsher. Chronicles note he was kept under close watch, with his freedom severely restricted, a stark contrast to his earlier captivity. The prolonged imprisonment, lasting over a year, became a major international crisis, galvanizing England to collect the colossal sum for his release. This dire situation could only be resolved through one means, setting the stage for a demand of unprecedented scale. The ransom demand stunned Christendom. Emperor Henry VI demanded 150,000 marks for King Richard's release, a sum exceeding 2 times the annual royal revenue of England. This was not merely a price but a calculated political weapon, an amount designed to cripple the Angevin Empire financially. The emperor understood the immense pressure this would place on England's regency government, led by Richard's mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and his chancellor, William Longchamp. A monumental fundraising campaign began immediately across England and Normandy. Research has shown that a 25% tax, known as the Saladin tithe, was ruthlessly enforced on both movable property and income. Churches were not spared, with gold and silver treasures melted down into coin. Contemporary chroniclers noted that no one was overlooked. As one official wrote describing the exhaustive efforts to gather even the smallest contributions, The administrative machine worked relentlessly for well over a year, from 1193 to 1194, to amass the colossal sum. The political implications of gathering and paying this ransom were profound. Some historians argue the effort strengthened royal administration by demonstrating its reach and efficiency. Others believe it bred deep-seated resentment among the barons and commoners alike, who bore the heavy financial burden for a king many had never seen. The payment itself, delivered to the German emperor, was a stark transfer of wealth that empowered a rival power while draining Richard's own domains. This event forced a re-evaluation of kingship, where a monarch's value was given a precise and staggering numerical price. Yet this staggering price would ultimately prove its worth when freedom was finally secured. Our journey into the life of Richard the Lionheart comes to an end. From the beginnings of the Angevin dynasty and his upbringing in a troubled court, Richard navigated family conflicts and growing up under Henry II. He became Duke of Aquitaine and quelled southern rebellions before his coronation and early reign. His focus shifted to raising funds for the crusade following Jerusalem's fall to Saladin, leading to a Mediterranean journey and the conquest of Cyprus. The text detailed his arrival at the besieged city of Acre, military engineering innovations, and Acre's surrender. We examined his coastal advance strategy, preparation for the Battle of Arsof, and the battle itself, including strategic dilemmas and the fortification of Ascalon. Failed negotiations with Saladin preceded his final advance and retreat, culminating in the Battle of Jaffa and the Treaty of Ramla terms. The dangerous journey home saw him taken prisoner by Leopold and Henry, leading to the king's ransom and his eventual release. Upon returning, he confronted John's rebellion and engaged in war with Philip Augustus, marked by the construction of Shir II Galad. His military successes continued, though disputes over treasure arose. The crossbow bolt that struck him led to 11 days of dying. Contemporaries remembered the king, contributing to the absent King Maith, while his military innovations and impact are still studied. The Lionheart's legacy endures in modern culture. Subscribe to our channel to not miss new episodes.